All right, welcome back, everyone. Looks like we're diving into some pretty interesting stuff today. Krampus.
Definitely not your average holiday figure.
No, not at all.
Mm.
And I'm seeing a bunch of notes here from you, from Wikipedia even.
Yeah, I tried to do a little reading before we got into this.
Good idea. I think everyone listening is probably pretty familiar with Krampus. At least the basics.
Right, like the horns and the chains and the whole scary look.
Oh, yeah, the look. That's the first thing you notice, right? I mean, forget Santa's rosy cheeks. This guy is like the total opposite.
Yeah, he's definitely meant to unsettle you a bit, make you think twice about any bad behavior.
It's funny, though, because he kind of fits with winter. Like when it's dark and cold and you just want to stay inside.
Right, he's like that embodiment of winter's dark side,
Yeah.
but also, a reminder that it doesn't last forever.
Spring always comes back, so there's hope even with all that gloom.
Exactly. Light and shadow, good and bad, it's all part of the balance.
And speaking of shadow, his look is seriously intense. I mean, horns, fangs, fur, a cloven hoof.
Uh-huh.
Where did all that come from?
Well, it's a mix of things, really. You see hints of pagan traditions, Christian symbolism.
Like those chains he carries. I read somewhere that it might symbolize the devil being bound by the church.
Could be. And then you've got those bells he wears. Not exactly the kind that jingle merrily.
More like a warning, right? Like, hey, I'm coming, you better watch out.
Exactly. You hear those clanging through a snowy village at night. Pretty scary thought.
I bet. But it's even scarier. Thinking about where this whole Krampus idea even came from.
Yeah, he's not just some random Christmas devil. There's a lot of history there.
I saw something about ancient gods like Pan and Cernunnos.
Ah, yes. Pan, from Greek mythology, he's often shown with horns and goat legs, kind of embodies the wild, untamed side of nature.
And Cernunnos, that's the Celtic one, right?
So that's the one. He's another horned god, associated with nature, fertility, even the underworld.
Okay, so we're seeing some common themes here. Nature, wildness, that darker side of things.
And it goes beyond individual figures, too. You've got concepts like the wild hunt from Germanic and Norse folklore.
Oh, yeah. The wild hunt. I always love those stories. Ghostly riders tearing through the night sky. It's pretty epic.
And terrifying. It's about that raw power of nature unleashed during winter.
Makes you wonder if Krampus is like part of that wild hunt, or if he's doing his own thing.
Well, he's not exactly alone in Alpine folklore. There are all sorts of other creatures and spirits.
Like those Schönperken and Schietperken you mentioned.
Those are great examples. The beautiful and the ugly parading through the villages, representing that duality of good and evil.
Which brings us to Krampus's partner in crime, or maybe partner in good behavior, St. Nicholas.
That's the key right there. It's
Yeah.
not just Krampus on his own. It's about the contrast, the balance between reward and punishment.
You've got the kindly saint giving presents, and then you've got Krampus bringing the fear.
A pretty effective system, you have to admit. Keeps everyone in line, especially around the holidays.
Makes me think about those Krampuslof events, where people dress up as Krampus and run through the streets.
Oh yeah, those are amazing. Imagine groups of guys in elaborate costumes, masks, horns, chains, the whole works.
And they're not just walking around, are they? From what I read, it can get pretty wild.
It can get a bit rowdy. There's definitely an element of mischief, even a bit of danger sometimes.
Well, I guess when you're dealing with a figure like Krampus, things are bound to get a little out of control sometimes.
Maybe that's part of the appeal, though. It's a way to confront those fears, let loose a little, all within a safe environment.
So we've covered a lot about Krampus so far. His appearance, those deep roots in folklore, even a bit about those Krampuslof events.
But we're just getting started. There's still so much more to explore, especially when it comes to Krampus in modern times. It's kind of funny how a figure that's supposed to be scary can also be so popular.
Yeah, it's like that weird mix of fear and fun, right? Like a roller coaster.
Hmm.
Makes you scream, but you kind of love it.
Exactly. I think that's part of what makes Krampus so interesting, especially in modern times.
Yeah, speaking of modern times, it's wild how Krampus is everywhere now.
Totally. He's gone global. Movies, books, even video games.
Yeah, and it's not even just like cheesy stuff either. I mean, you mentioned the horror comedy film Krampus.
Yeah, that one's pretty interesting. Takes this old figure and drops him right into a modern family Christmas.
What I found interesting was how it played on that fear of losing the Christmas spirit.
Right. Like if you're not careful, if you get too caught up in the consumerism, the pressure to be perfect, Krampus will come knocking.
And not with presents. But it also makes you think, what does Krampus consider bad behavior these days?
Yeah, it's not so simple anymore, right? Is it just about following the rules, or is there more to it?
Maybe Krampus is more about being genuine, authentic. cutting through all the fake holiday cheer.
Could be. He sees right through the facade. Speaking of seeing through things, what about that sack he carries?
Oh man, the sack. That's got to be one of the creepiest parts of the whole thing.
Definitely adds to the fear factor. It's where all those unspoken anxieties go, about punishment, consequences.
So is it just a prop, or do you think there's something more to it?
Well, think about it symbolically. It could represent that isolation, being separated from everything you know.
Like being taken away, banished?
Exactly. And then you're alone, in the dark, facing the consequences of your actions.
And then there's the whole eating naughty children thing. Pretty intense.
Definitely more for shock value than anything, but again, there's a symbolic layer there.
What do you mean?
Well, being consumed by Krampus, it's like being swallowed up by those consequences, by the darkness.
So it's not so much about physical punishment, but more like a spiritual or emotional reckoning.
I think so. It's about confronting those shadow parts of yourself, the ones that tempt you to misbehave.
Makes sense. It's like he's holding up a mirror, forcing you to face those darker impulses.
Exactly. And maybe that's why he's still relevant today. We all have those impulses, right?
I know I do. But it's not just about fear and punishment, is it? There's also this idea of release, of catharsis.
Totally. Think about those Krampuslauf events again. All that energy, the noise, the chaos. It's a way to let loose, to process those darker emotions in a safe way.
So instead of bottling it all up, you kind of get it out in the open, confront it head on.
And by doing that, maybe you actually diminish its power, take away some of that fear.
Like a good scream can sometimes be really therapeutic. But what about those birch rods? Are those just for show?
Now, those are interesting. Birch has a lot of symbolic meanings in folklore.
Yeah? Like what?
Well, it's often associated with purification, renewal. Some cultures use birch branches to drive away evil spirits.
Interesting. So maybe those rods aren't about physical punishment, but more about symbolic cleansing.
Could be a way to whip away those bad habits, negative energies.
So Krampus is like a spiritual life coach with a bit more of an edge.
Something like that. But seriously, it's about restoring balance, upholding those shared values.
So even though he's scary, he's actually trying to help us.
In a way, yes. He's reminding us of the consequences, pushing us to be better.
But the big question is Krampus good or bad? I mean, after all this, I'm still not sure.
That's the thing about Krampus. He defies those simple labels. He's a disruptor. He embodies chaos, but he also brings balance and accountability.
So maybe it's not about good versus evil. It's about understanding the complexity, the duality of human nature.
Exactly. We all have light and shadow within us. Krampus just forces us to confront that truth.
And maybe that's why he's so fascinating. He's not a one-dimensional character. He represents the messiness of life itself.
That's a great way to put it. He's a mirror to our own contradictions and complexities.
We've talked about his history, his looks, his role in traditions, even his modern popularity. But I feel like there's something we're missing. Something that could give us a whole new perspective on Krampus. While we've been talking, I keep thinking back to what you said before about Krampus being like a janitor, cleaning up the mess we make with all our bad behavior.
Haha, cosmic janitor. I like that. But it makes you wonder, right? What if there's more to it than just punishment?
What are you getting at?
Well, think about all the Krampus stuff, the costumes, the masks, the birch rods, the parades. Maybe it's not just about scaring people straight. What if it's a way to actually deal with negativity?
You mean like let it all out? A kind of emotional detox?
Yeah, sort of. Imagine those Krampuslauf events again. All that noise, the chaos, people running around in scary costumes. It's a way to express those darker feelings, those impulses, but in a safe way.
And maybe by doing that, by confronting those fears, you actually make them less scary.
Exactly. It's like facing your demons and realizing they're not so powerful after all.
I could see that. So Krampus is not just about punishing bad behavior. Maybe he's helping us deal with it too.
Right. It's like a twisted form of therapy. He's forcing us to confront those darker parts of ourselves, the stuff we usually try to hide.
Which could actually be a good thing, right? I mean, we all have those shadows lurking inside. Maybe Krampus is just trying to help us integrate them, make us whole.
I think that's a really interesting way to look at it. And it makes sense when you consider how ancient cultures used rituals to purify themselves, to cleanse the space of negative energy.
So those Krampus traditions, as crazy as they seem, they might actually serve a similar purpose.
Could be. It's about acknowledging the darkness, even celebrating it in a way, and then moving on.
Wow. That gives Krampus a whole new dimension. He's not just some scary monster. He's like a guide, a catalyst for growth.
And that's a powerful message, don't you think? Even in the midst of all the holiday cheer, there's this reminder that we need to embrace our shadows, learn from them.
It's a good reminder for all of us, really. Not just during the holidays, but all year round. We all have that inner Krampus, those parts of ourselves we don't always want to admit to.
But maybe instead of being afraid of them, we can learn to see them as opportunities for growth. Even maybe, as you said, allies.
So, for everyone listening, I think this is a great takeaway from our deep dive into Krampus. It's not just about scary stories and punishments. There's a deeper message here about embracing the fullness of who we are, light and shadow and all.
And maybe that's the ultimate gift of Krampus, a deeper understanding of ourselves and what it truly means to be human.
Well said. I think that's a perfect note to end on.
Happy holidays, everyone!
Happy holidays. And remember, even if Krampus comes knocking this year, there might be a hidden lesson in that encounter.